improved our schools and paid teachers better, had some of the most significant test score results that was based on a court case that I had inherited from 2 governors ago, Bill Clinton, Jim Guy Tucker, and finally it landed on my desk, and we actually finally got it resolved. We also rebuilt our road system. People want roads, and the people in my state voted by an 80% margin to vote for those roads and to pay 3 cents a gallon for gasoline. Government's supposed to work. It's not about the politics of saying I never raised a tax. It's about saying I made government work. And the fact is, there were specific issues that I've been attacked for, sometimes pretty brutally on some of these television spots. But I'm proud of the fact that I governed and lowered taxes and did something that had never been done in my state, and did it against the headwinds of a Democrat legislature that had never done it in 160 years before.
Governor Romney?
Well, facts are stubborn things. I think, Mike, you agreed that net, you raised taxes by $500 million. Is that right?
You know, Mitt, let's talk about how stubborn the facts are.
Answer the question.
The fees I think you raised were more like $500 million, not 240. You came into office with a deficit,
I asked you
and
a
you
question.
left with one.
You know, facts are stubborn things. Let's get the facts right. Okay, I came in. There was a $3 billion
tax cuts in 2002.
You know, Mike, you make up facts faster than you talk, and that's saying something. So let's slow it down and let's get the facts correctly.
Right.
I came in. There was a $3 billion budget gap. Together with the legislature, we cut spending, we also raised fees, and we calculated how much money we raised from the fees. It was $240 million. We can show you the number. And at the end of my first year, we had a surplus. Every single year I was in office, I generated a surplus. And we put over $1 billion in our rainy day fund. Now, I asked you a question to begin with, and that was, net, did you raise taxes in your state by $500 million?
We raised jobs. We built our roads.
You know, that's political speak.
You know,
the question is, you can avoid this issue by just saying
tens of millions of dollars saying all negative things about me. If someone raises a question, you say it's a personal attack, and facts are stubborn things. And you mentioned that. And did you support or oppose the 2002 Bush tax cuts?
I have never opposed the Bush 2002 tax cuts. I supported them. The first comment I made about the Bush tax cuts was that I supported the Bush tax cuts. I do not oppose them. I support them, always have. Now let me go back to the question I've asked you that you've refused to answer 3 times. Did you raise taxes net in Arkansas by $500 million?
By a court order that said we had to improve education? Maybe you don't have to obey the court in Massachusetts. I did in Arkansas. And you know something? Education is a good thing for kids, because kids like me wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for a good education.
Let me break in here, and this reminds me of Admiral Stockdale, who said, "Who am I and why am I here, Mayor Giuliani?" So let me ask you a question. You like to say that you cut taxes 23 times as mayor of New York, but in fact a number of those tax cuts were enacted over your opposition. There was a case in 1998 where you fought a city council for 5 months when they wanted to reduce a tax surcharge. And even before 9/11, you had left New York City with almost a $3 billion deficit. So have you exaggerated your record on taxes and spending?
Not at all. I actually recommended 64 tax cuts and accomplished 23 of them. 18 of them were the ones I originally proposed, and the balance were ones that I accepted in compromise. So that makes up the 23. Specifically, you can go look, I lowered the income tax rate by 24% from the day I got in until the day I got out. The 24% lower income tax was yielding 42% more revenues. So I just don't talk about supply side. I actually made it work. I lowered the hotel occupancy tax by 34%, and we were making $200 million more on the lower tax than on the higher tax. I lowered the sales tax. The overall tax burden on New Yorkers was reduced by 17% by the time I left office. It was the largest tax cut ever done in the history of the city. It was the largest tax cut done in government anywhere in the 1990s, including all city, all state, all at the federal level, because the federal level raised taxes during that period. It led George Will to write a column saying that I ran the most conservative government in the United States over the last 50 to 60 years, mainly because of the aggressive tax cutting that I did. And I am a supply sider. I believe if you need more revenue, one of the first things you go look to is an anti-competitive tax. Right now, if we reduce the corporate tax, which is the second highest in the world, 35%, if we reduced it to 30 or to 25%, we would make more money. And the Bush tax cuts did the same thing. The Bush tax cuts are now yielding the United States government more money than we were getting when we had the higher tax. So Everyone has their record to look to. We have all different pluses and minuses, but from the point of view of being a tax cutter, I had the best record of anyone in government in the 1990s in cutting taxes.
Senator Thompson, you have unveiled a plan during this campaign that would extend the Bush tax cuts, end the estate tax, repeal the alternative minimum tax, and cut the corporate tax rate. The problem, according to some experts, is they say this would blow a hole in the deficit. It would reduce federal revenues by $2.5 trillion over 10 years. Now, when we talked about this on Fox News Sunday, you say one of the ways that you would pay for it is by revamping Social Security and cutting benefits for Social Security. Question, if the Democrats, as they almost certainly would, block that in Congress, isn't that whole plan pretty impractical?
In the first place, I never said that I was cutting Social Security. What I suggested with regard to Social Security...
You're going to reduce the cost of living...
Well, let me tell you what I propose. It takes a moment, and I have the only plan having to do with Social Security of anyone at the table. Number one. Everyone says it's a big problem. Nobody puts anything on the table to do anything about it. I've suggested that it's going bankrupt. I mean, the alternative with regard to Social Security is losing Social Security as we know it. So it's a plan to save Social Security. You do two things. Allow people to set up an individual retirement account where the government would match their funds. The average guy at the end of their working life would have a few $100,000, and it would save government money in the process if you did one other thing, and that is index initial retirement benefits to inflation instead of to wages as they are now. We're promising future retirees something we can't possibly deliver. We're promising future retirees more benefits than what current and past retirees have gotten. My plan would not affect current retirees or those near retirees.
But this would reduce, forgive me, sir, this would reduce the cost of living increases from what they currently are if you change the index.
No, you got it backwards.
You think it would increase the cost of living?
No. If you'll give me a moment. They're currently indexed to wages. I'm suggesting they be indexed to inflation. You'd keep the cost of living increase, but you wouldn't increase it as much as what we're promising in the future. The increase would not be as much as what we're promising in the future, which we cannot deliver. Number one. Ask any expert in town and they'll tell you that. Nobody likes to talk about it, but that's the fact. Now what you would do at the end of the day is actuarially you'd make the Social Security plan sound, and you'd save about $4.7 trillion over a period.
And what do you do when the Democrats say no?
Well, you fight them. You take the case to the American people. I think that the president's got to be willing to go over the heads of the Democrats and be able to look into the camera, tell the American people what the situation is, and suggest what we've got to do about it. That's one of the things we're lacking in Washington, D.C., I think. Nobody has any credibility. Nobody can make the case, apparently, to the American people with regard to the things that we need to do. And that's one of them.
Anybody else here at the table want to support this? Still would be a cost of living increase, but reducing the increase in the cost of living. Anybody else want to do it?
The initial benefit, the cost of living increase after you retire would increase just the way it always has.
I think Fred raises with a great deal of boldness a very important topic, but I think reducing the initial benefit for retirees, even those of modest and moderate incomes, would be a big mistake, and I don't think that would be politically acceptable, and I think it would be wrong. I think the idea, however, that Fred has described, which is having a different index for higher income individuals, is something which has some merit and which solves a big portion of the Social Security gap. Added to that are personal accounts which can have a higher rate of return than what people currently get by having government debt behind their Social Security.
I want to talk about one other...
And finally, of course, is adjusting the retirement age. Those three things combined can solve the problem of Social Security, but I don't agree that we should cut the initial benefit calculation for modest income Americans who rely on Social Security
I want to talk about one other...
I'm suggesting they, of course, get the same thing that current retirees are getting.
Could we just weigh in on this for 30 seconds?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, look, I admire Fred's courage. I admire a lot of people who have put forth proposals, especially the President